Let me also welcome our very honorable and respectable colleagues from Philippines, including Madam Liddy and her colleagues from EPMDD, as well as other partner organizations. So just to set some of the housekeeping rules, in line with the austerity measures taken by the government of Pakistan, today's session is being conducted in a hybrid manner where we have a lot of people joining us, speaker as well as participants online. The session is being recorded and the video will also be available online, and you're always welcome. Feel free to visit the discussion later, and you can also share it within your networks. As for online participants, if you wish to raise any point or address any comment, feel free to click on the raise hand tab and we'll allocate a proper time to you, or else you can also drop your questions and comments in the chat box as well. And just to kind of mention, we do have ample time for the Q&A session as the discussion goes, and we'll be requesting your interventions as well. So with this, let me come to very briefly to the topic in hand, which is Pakistan's energy security and the geopolitical turmoil that we're actually going through. I'll set a very brief scene before coming to the official welcome and opening from Dr. Abid. So I think just raising perhaps just one point, that the global energy system that we've been talking about since last is kind of based on one very uh, important but also very silent assumption, which basically is that the principles of the energy trade, of the energy structure, they're all very, I mean, including the shipping lines, the energy trade routes, and etc. and all, they're kind of based on the assumption that this infrastructure would kind of hold. What we have actually seen over the past uh, few weeks is that, driven by the geopolitical turmoil, geopolitical shocks, and the US around war, that principle hasn't actually hold, which has eventually led to a lot of uh, energy crisis, particularly specifically the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So the fossil fuel prices have increased, leading to not only an increase in the generation or the energy prices, but also eventually it actually had a very rippling effect coming down or trickling down to all of the key sectors, including the food prices, including the oil prices, including the agricultural activity. And again, it actually had a very significant impact on all the essential services as well as social safety nets across the country. So for Pakistan, this crisis has even a more significant impact because of the vulnerabilities being, again, very, very chronic to us. Our energy mix already relies very heavily on the imported fossil fuels, and we can already see a very direct impact coming on the transport sector of Pakistan, given which the diesel and the gasoline prices have shocked. And also the sectors most critical to the economic life, just like we talked about agriculture, food, etc. There also have been exposed. So the question before us today is particularly to analyze how different streams of Pakistan's energy mix, including the fossil fuels, including the renewables, and even looking into it, some of the demand sectors, what have been the landscape or impacts on those, how those sectors have actually revolved, and importantly, what exactly is needed to make the system more resilient and sustainable. But I think we'll be again presenting a whole list of recommendations from our end. But to initiate the discussion, let me stop here and come to Dr. Abid Qayyum Soleri for his opening and scene setting remarks. Dr. Abid is the Executive Director of SDPI, and along with that, he's also the Chairperson of the Board of Directors of National Disaster and Risk Management Fund, NDRMF, and also an advisory member of the Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI. So with this, Dr. Abid, over to you.
Thank you, Ubaid. First of all, let me take this opportunity to welcome our guest from Philippines. It's indeed an honor to host Asian People Movement Development Movement delegation in Pakistan and at SDPI. APDM, of course, we know a very credible network across Asia. And I think it's very pertinent that they have joined in today's discussion, which is all about people and all about development. Let me start by saying that today's oil crisis is not the unique one. It is not one of the first one. We have been here before, whether it was Ukraine Russia conflict, whether it was the oil challenge of 70s, but the circumstances in the world which are shaping around this challenge, those are quite unique, and those are quite exceptional. And when I say they are very exceptional, I'm referring to the level of debt that the governments are facing both in developed as well as in developing world. I'm talking of level of inflation that the central banks are facing across the globe, and I'm talking of level of fiscal deficit. Just to give you a comparison, in last 10 years, every 1 in 4 banks in developed world and every 1 in 2 central banks in developing countries, they couldn't actually remain confined to the inflation target that they had set. So 33% of central banks in the developed world and 50% of central banks in the developing countries, they couldn't rein inflation. And it's not only a year story, 2-year story, 3-year story. That is happening for almost a decade under different external challenges. Either it was COVID, either it was climate change, either it is conflict and wars, etc. And that has shaped today's energy demand. Second, of course, is the level of debt. And this fiscal deficit, the revenue and expenditure mismatch, very familiar story in Pakistan. That is not only Pakistan's story, it is almost everywhere. And that is precisely the reason that this current energy shock is affecting the countries with the high debt, with high inflation, and with the high deficit. For example, in the developed world, it's the UK, which would be the most affected in this crisis, the United Kingdom. In case of emerging economies, we know if we look at the ranking by Economist magazine that they issued 2 weeks ago, it's Jordan, followed by Pakistan, followed by Sri Lanka, followed by Egypt, and Ethiopia. Brazil is also part of it. Indonesia is also a part of it. So all the countries which are dependent on imported fossil fuel, where the reserves, foreign exchange reserves, they are insufficient, where debt level is high, where the fiscal deficit is high. So those are the countries which are getting affected. And unfortunately, Pakistan has this dubious distinction to be among one of them. Now, going forward and coming to today's seminar's this topic, just like after 1970s, the energy scene and energy utilization got changed. And after September 11, the global travels that got changed. I think after this war, whenever the after comes, the whole energy scenario that would change. Now, what is happening? For example, EU that was now the lone champion in the developed world after US withdrawal from UNFCCC. Even in EU, there is a discussion and there is a divide on carbon capping. And in Western Europe countries, they are talking of removing that cap, including France, where we keep on referring to Paris Agreement. Even in France now, there are voices against the Green Pact of European Union, because it's quite obvious the countries, they will not be able to rely on green and clean mechanism. So the countries which can afford nuclear power, they are going nuclear. Which can afford a coal power plant, they will go increase their reliance on coal. And for countries like Pakistan, I think we have an excellent chance to give a boost to renewable energy. Now, when we talk of renewable energy, it's not only for the love of environment and for the love of climate change. As I said, it's also because of the prices that would remain high in months to come for fossil fuel. Only today, Saudi Arabia has announced charging $20 per barrel premium on the Oman and Middle East light crude. So Middle East light crude, which is now selling around $124 per barrel, Saudi Arabia has announced that they would charge $20 per barrel premium on it for supplies for May, which means we are talking of $148 per barrel. Only yesterday, STPI, we released a report that if oil touches $150 per barrel, that means inflation in Pakistan hitting in double digit. That means GDP getting reduced by 1 to 1.5%. That means interest rate getting high. So it's not only a dollar per barrel increase. Just to give the audience a very layperson formula, there is 159 liter per barrel. If this price increases from $70 per barrel to $140 per barrel, doubles, you can simply divide. So for every $10 per barrel, it is 18 rupees per liter, which is the direct increase in price. If it doubles, you can simply look at 18 multiplied by 7 if it's $70 per barrel. So that is a direct increase, and then it's taxation on it, and then it's levy on it, PDL, and then it's duty and all sort of other these cost, the margin for dealers and other costs. So that actually makes this energy simply not only unreliable, but it's also not pragmatic or practical to depend on it for any sort of growth proposition. And if that is the case, then we will have to look at alternatives. Now, it's quite easy, for example, to look at oil supply route. Red Sea is now one of them. But my major concern is gas. Qatar authorities, they have said that even if the war stops tomorrow, they will take not months, at least 4 to 5 years to actually take their LNG plant to the same level where it was before the war. Now, if we are talking of 4 to 5 years, it's again not only the supply of gas, it is the supply of urea fertilizer. We are dependent on LNG for our urea production. We are dependent on gas for our IPPs. Karachi Electric Corporation, where under the agreements, either we have to pay them the price differential if we are not able to pay them the gas to produce electricity. So it's a tariff differential that we have to pay. KE, it depends on gas for production, and then the domestic consumer. And that is the kharif crop when we will require the fertilizer. And the same is, of course, would be the winter situation when the domestic heating pressure would also be there. So in a nutshell, I think right now is the moment where we should revise and review our renewable energy policy. We know we, under the previous budget, we tried to discourage solar panels. We also tried to discourage net metering. And it is not the solar panel or the net meters which are the culprits. It is our connectivity and it is our storage. The weak storage at grid, the weak storage at consumer level, the infrastructure and connectivity. And I think the plan B, if we have to move beyond barrel, is to look at how that connectivity can be achieved, how the storage can be improved. I've heard that perhaps in the next fiscal budget, there are two propositions going on. I'm not able to confirm it from official sources yet, but the two propositions is one is added taxation on solar panel and the batteries, and second is looking at the net metering formula. I think if we go for any of those routes, that would be collective suicide when it comes to energy. We know we have taken the liberty of reducing petroleum development levy, and we have to somehow compensate for the lost revenue from some sources, but that lost revenue shouldn't be compensated through increased taxation on solar powers, solar panels, solar batteries. That should not be compensated. There is also a proposal floating that the carbon tax should be increased from 2.5 to 5 rupees per liter. Again, that would be an indirect consumption tax, and we should discourage indirect consumption taxes. I'm all for wealth tax. I'm all for other direct taxes if those can be compensated. I'm again against taxation on this salaried class. The FBR data tells us that salaried class in the last fiscal year so far, they have paid 352%, 3.52 times higher than the total tax paid by exporters, by retailers, by real estate, the collective tax paid by them versus the salaried class. So I think when we talk of justice, whether it's climate justice, whether it's energy justice, all of these things, they are interconnected. It is not weird to discuss macroeconomy in an energy discussion, because the decision that we are taking on energy, they are actually shaped by our macroeconomic compulsions, and our macroeconomy in turn gets shaped by whatever we decide on energy. And these two, they are interrelated, and they have to be discussed collectively. And I'm very grateful to the learned panel. One is looking forward to learn from them, not only the way forward for Pakistan, but what the fellow colleagues and comrades they are doing in peer economies, what can be done about it. I'll be joining rest of the seminar online because of another this engagement. But I hope that after half an hour, I'll get free from that engagement. I'll be able to rejoin you. Thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me opportunity to share my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Dr. Abid, for framing the stakes of the conversation so clearly, and especially from the perspective of the development finance talked about, and the response of the DFIs and MDBs, and also how reliance on indigenous resources would actually be the very fundamental or the core of energy security going forward, especially in around renewable energy in Pakistan. And I think this is particularly where we would be deep diving into in the next session. That is basically the technical heart of today's topic we're going into. But just before going forward, the way it is structured is that we'll have multiple technical presentations, each providing an overview of the impact of US-Iran war on that segment, followed by a highlight of recommendations that will be coming. So this presentations and the follow-up recommendations is something that has been prepared jointly by the member organizations of Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition and Alliance for Climate Justice and Clean Energy. So I'll during the discussion, I'll kind of request to hold off the questions and comments until we have completed all the presentation, and after that we actually have a whole hour of this detailed discussion, as well as taking any comments, suggestions from your end as well. So just the thematic areas that we actually have are initially taking the discussion from the power sector. So for that, let me invite Ms. Zainab Baba. Zainab is currently working as a researcher and in Sustainable Development Policy Institute to initiate the discussion. And in parallel, let me just request Nabia and Rafisab, if you could please join us on the piece front. Zainab, please go ahead.
Thank you, Beth. Can I have the slider, please? So I believe Dr. Abid have very well framed the whole situation, that what's happening because of this US-Iran conflict. I'll particularly link this with the power sector. What's its impact that is being observed by the power sector? Well, how I see this crisis is kind of a stress test for the economic and the energy model that we currently have. We know that whenever a shock or any significant impact is observed by the energy sector, the effect is being trickled down to the whole of the economy or all the segments of the society. So energy sits at the center of the economy. So it's very important that we make our sector secure and kind of protect this from the external volatility that we currently have. We know that from past decades, Pakistan is currently reliant on imported fossil fuels, which kinds of links us to this volatility. This slide here basically kinds of showing the timeline where the unexpected recent Iran-US conflict unfolded. If we see at the first number, that's February 28th, the first strike on Iran by Israel and US. Leading to the March 4 crisis, which kind of was the main inflection point for Pakistan. Why it was the main inflection point? Because March 4 was the point when the Strait of Hormuz was closed. And why Strait of Hormuz plays an important role for Pakistan is because it kind of provides a route to transmit 90% of the imported fossil fuels that we currently need for our energy balance. So that plays a major role, that why the energy crisis or the fossil fuel price shocks that we are currently observing comes from. Then moving forward with this crisis on March 18, Iran kind of attacked the LNG's main export facility, which not only resulted in the price shocks, but also a major supply disruption. Then moving forward, if we come to the April 6th, that is what we call as the main triple price shock, where we can see that not only the price for furnace oil increased by 66%, but LNG and the imported coal price increased by 89 and 68% simultaneously. Now, this slide basically kind of shows that what were the projections of NEPRA for the year 2026 were, how they envisioned the price would be, and what the reality currently is because of this shock that we are currently observing. If you look at the number RLNG's price, it was supposed to be around 1,225 rupees per MMBTU. But if we look at the actual number that we are currently paying, that's around 2,100 rupees, which kind of shows a 71% deviation from the expected price that the government perceived would be. Similarly, one important point to note here is that if we see at the exchange rate, we can see that there is no significant difference here. So this price shock is not coming from any currency risk or any currency crisis currently. It's mainly related to the energy commodity price. Energy commodity price is the fuel cost that we currently pay for getting this imported fuel. This slide basically here shows the 5 scenarios that NEPRA designed that could possibly take place in the year 2026. If we look at the right side of the slide, you can see the worst scenario, or you can say the highest fuel cost they envisioned was a 5% increase, which is currently not operating in the current circumstances. The current price is ranging from 30 to 90% of the fuel price increase, and that is mainly because of this price shock volatility. And this is because this is currently not in control of our government, because we are dependent on imported fuel for a certain amount. So this shock is kind of coming from external shock. And if the darker area in the bar is kind of showing the fixed cost capacity, that is the capacity payments that we have to pay, either we are utilizing this capacity or not. It doesn't matter that we have the fuel, the imported fuel to run these plants, but if we have made these power purchase agreements to deliver, to have this capacity, we have to pay these capacity charges. This kind of links us to the debt sensitivity that Dr. Abid was mentioning earlier. So this slide is basically showing the cost composition of the energy price that we are currently paying. Around 31% of this cost comes from the fuel cost that we're paying, and 59% of this is the capacity charges. We know that capacity charges is something that we cannot do about anything at this moment, but the point where we need to focus on is the fuel cost. And if we talk about specifically RLNG, which is the most impacted fuel at the moment, is that as I've mentioned earlier, that RLNG experienced a 71% increase in price because of the recent situation. We can see that there won't be like the government envisioned the energy price to be around 25 rupees per kilowatt hour. But in the current scenario, this price won't be possible if we continue focusing on the energy mix that we expected to use for energy generation. So what could be the possible ways that government could think of at the moment is replacing the ultimate solutions or the immediate solutions, you can say, replacing the RLNG with imported coal. But there are a number of uncertainties associated with this. Number one is that imported coal is not economically feasible. Why? Because it's again imported, so it's linked with the geopolitical situation that we have already discussed, that it's kind of creating volatility, and it's not kind of it's kind of severely impacting the energy situation. Secondly, if we want to bring in more imported coal, we need to bring more infrastructure, and that needs a lot of investment. And we can see from our previous experiences that the investments that we made in coal are currently stranded, and there is not significant impact that is currently coming to the energy sector from these investments. So this this scenario kinds of get negated here, that we cannot follow this scenario. Second scenario that government can kind of think of at the moment is replacing RLNG with RFO, which is again not a suitable option. Because the price of RFO has increased like multiple times. We have seen that. And the third scenario is if we continue using the RLNG with new price, that again comes with a higher cost. That is like 2 to 3 rupees increase in per kilowatt hour generation. If we have a look at the broader impact of these scenarios, if we switch the RLNG generation that was around 14 to 15% of generation to imported coal, then there will be a cost of around 89 billion rupees that the government will have to incur. Similarly, if we switch the 14% RLNG with RFO based power generation, it will cost around 607 billion rupees. And if we switch with the new LNG war price, that will be the around 257 billion cost, which are huge numbers. So all these three scenarios are kind of negated and cannot be followed by the government at the moment, considering the economics around these situations. So these are not economically feasible options to follow. So now comes the question that if these are not the feasible options, that what government can do? I won't be focusing much on what government can do at this moment, because we have a charter of demand that is kind of catering this question. I'll just be sharing that from our experience in this geopolitical situation, we have seen that solar have provided a buffer against this geopolitical shock to Pakistan. and Pakistan's story have been highlighted at multiple global forums, that how solar have protected our grid from these external shocks. So we need to build on this story and expand on solar and accompany this solar with the storage capacity. We have to convert this variable resource of energy production to kind of a reliable source of energy production by integration of efficient storage systems in the economy. So the key takeaways of this presentation are that the projected power purchase price are kind of doubled in this year because of the geopolitical shock. The fossil fuel scenarios that we currently have, we need to kind of reprioritize them or shift them towards renewables, because if we continue doing energy generation from fossil fuels, it will cost us not only our energy security in the long term, but also a higher cost will be paid by the consumer and by the overall economy. So kind of creating a fiscal strain on the economy. Thirdly, it's that the capacity charges are fixed. So this is one of the significant area whenever we're talking about energy sector challenges or vulnerabilities, capacity charges comes up at the top. So there is also kind of highlighting a structural inefficiency that we need to kind of focus on. One solution that comes, which is strategically and economically feasible at this point, is the distributed solar. There are a number of benefits that distributed solar can currently provide to the country. That includes mainly at this point is the no fuel cost and the reliability, because it's not exposed to the external shocks and it's manageable by the indigenous resources. So with this, I will like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zainab, for highlighting the power. And while we're at the power sector, Zainab has kind of hinted towards the renewable and how solar is kind of acting as a shield. But I believe we actually have a whole dedicated presentation, which would be given by Ms. Nabia Imran from Renewables First. So thank you so much, Nabia, for joining us. And if I can request the MIS team to please share the second presentation. The other one, the right one. Yes, thank you. And with this, Nabia, so over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Just to confirm. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ubed, for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Nabia. I work as an Associate Energy Insights at Renewables First. I would like to appreciate SDPI for hosting this event and for organizing it. And thank you to Dr. Abid and Ms. Zainab for sharing their remarks. I'm going to be sharing some insights on how we're seeing the adoption of solar serve as a hedge against Pakistan's energy security and the way that we're looking at it. So the one thing I want to set up as an insight before we start is that the adoption of distributed solar in Pakistan has protected Pakistan from certain shocks in the Middle East. Not to say that shocks don't exist. We are still exposed, but it would have been much worse had solar not been adopted by the country at the scale that it has. So just to give a background, Pakistan, like other developing economies, has a fossil fuel dependent economy. A major chunk of our fossil fuel economy is dependent on imports as well. Yes, our fossil fuel imports have declined for the past couple of years and that is attributed to mainly two factors. One is, of course, the economic conditions, but secondly, certain energy demand, especially growth in demand, has been displaced by solar, not just net metering, but mainly off-grid and behind the meter, especially in domestic, industrial, and agricultural sectors. So, and as you can see, LNG and crude oil / petroleum products make a big chunk of our fossil fuel imports. A few things I would like to really highlight over here is that despite the reduction in the volume of fossil fuel imports, the cost has actually increased, especially the per unit cost, which is because of several factors, mainly our currency depreciation. And we continue to spend a big chunk of our national GDP, which was like 10.6% of the national GDP in fiscal year 24 on fossil fuel imports. Now, for a country like Pakistan, spending that much money on things again and again, which are not just bad for the environment, but also exposed to geopolitical shocks, is something that really impacts the economy. And at the end of the day, this is money that at our current stage of development could be spent elsewhere and could be spent on other areas for the development in the country. These charts now show the impact of currency depreciation. So the dotted lines represent the increase in prices globally. That is something that's beyond Pakistan's control. Obviously, there's geopolitical factors, especially you can see in fiscal year 22, which is when the Ukraine crisis happened. That's where the prices have surged. But in Pakistani rupee terms, the impacts are much worse. And that is because our currency has depreciated against the dollar. The problem over here is that our fossil fuel import are contracted in terms of dollars, but the cost recovery is in Pakistani rupees. So this mismatch and the lack of currency hedging exposes us to geopolitical shocks, and the currency depreciation just makes the crisis worse for our country. All in all, what this shows is that, and I've not even tapped into the thermal and conversion losses that happen because of fossil fuels. Our research shows that fossil fuels lose 60% of their value before they produce any kind of useful energy. So we're not getting into that. This is just an economic case as to why fossil fuels are a burden and the way that they have impacted the economy and why we need alternative pathways to move forward. And I think the current crisis that we see really sets the stage for that. So the alternative path that we see is obviously through distributed energy resources, which is where solar comes into play. Just to, I'm sure you guys are aware of the import data that we have, but just to kind of bring it up to date, as of February 26, Pakistan has imported 52 gigawatts of solar panels, and while no set number exists for the deployment, we can safely assume that at the end of fiscal year 25, we have deployed 32 gigawatts at least. We can assume that the number has increased because we are almost at the end of fiscal year 26 as of right now. These solar panels are also complemented by batteries. Of course, batteries is something that are still a little more expensive than solar panels. So this is not something at par with solar panels right now, but we are seeing a boom in this case as well. Now, this is just import data. The main idea behind this is that while we have import data available, official methodologies often do not account for the scale of behind the meter and off-grid solutions. Net metering data is widely publicly available instead of industry reports and just a wide range of hearings, for example. But for distributed solar and behind the meter, we only have estimates available. So we did some analysis just to understand the scale at which solar is reshaping our electricity mix. And this is what the research shows. If you look at the blue bars, those are grid sales in Pakistan for the past since fiscal year 2017, and if you look at the blue bar, they are declining. One could assume that this means we are consuming less electricity, but when you account for distributed solar, it shows that our electricity demand is increasing in line with our urbanization, population growth, and our GDP growth, which is not ideal, but it's still there. But as of fiscal year 25, we estimate that solar produced around 43 terawatt hours of electricity, which is basically almost one third of our grid sales. And in this, just to put it into perspective, the generation from solar has displaced fossil fuels in our primary energy supply. So it's not just that we are consuming solar or producing electricity from that. It shows that each terawatt hour from solar power is displacing MTOEs from fossil fuels. And I think that is the transition under play in Pakistan and not something that is completely taken into consideration when we look at official methodologies. Now, to the purpose of setting the stage up where we're talking about fossil fuels, how they're economically inefficient and how solar is contributing to our electricity mix, is to then obviously connect it to the current crisis where we have looked at basically LNG and oil imports. Now, just to give a bit of a background, Pakistan's dependence on the Strait of Hormuz is for two fossil fuels, that's LNG and oil. LNG is primarily used in the power, industrial, and fertilizer sectors, whereas oil is mainly transportation. So the impacts are a little different. In the case of LNG, Pakistan's LNG demand has been displaced by solar for the past few years. even before the crisis existed, the government has wanted to renegotiate its contracts with Qatar, as well as we have diverted some cargoes from our ports because we don't have storage capacity and we don't need those cargoes as much anymore, mainly because in the industrial and power sector, this demand has been displaced. The idea is that since our research with some of our partner organization, we did this like short paper on this. The study revealed that since fiscal year 2017, solar has helped avoid $12 billion in oil and gas imports up to February 2026. Of course, if you take March into account, the number would essentially increase. The idea is that by adopting solar, Pakistan was able to reduce the impact of the current crisis on our basically power sector. This is not to say that the power sector or like lack of or unavailability of LNG is not a problem. It is a problem, but it's not as bad as it would have been had solar not existed in the first place. And of course, the hedge that solar is providing is only to a certain extent. As the crisis goes on, which Zainab's presentation also mentioned, there will be choices that will need to be made, because LNG in just the power sector, for example, 20% of grid electricity comes from LNG. So if you don't have LNG available, there are choices that will need to be made. And I think that is the point of us gathering here today, is to kind of portray or to discuss how certain choices might be better for us in the long run than others. But this is the case of LNG, where the idea is that the adoption of solar has provided a hedge. Oil, on the other hand, is a very, very different story. As of Energy Yearbook 2025, 87% of our oil goes to the transportation sector, which means that there is no way that the current crisis would not impact our transportation sector. We have been hearing news and OGRA notifications on the increase in prices. Brent prices have reached triple digits over the past few weeks. And so have prices for motor spirit and high-speed diesel in the country. The flat line over here is when the prices were stable, and that is only because the government was subsidizing that. The prices in the country were not increasing in line with international markets because of subsidies, not because that we could just keep using oil in that sense. And because the fiscal space that IMF is also putting the pressure on Pakistan's government, the prices had to be increased last week. And we can expect that to possibly increase over the next few weeks, depending on how the crisis goes. The idea over here is that in Pakistan's case right now, we see two opposing elements. The case of LNG is that solar has served as a buffer, but because the transportation sector is still heavily reliant on fossil fuels, over here the crisis has been much worse. The point of highlighting this is that we see the power sector adopting clean energy resources, and so the impact of the crisis is not as hard. But transportation, I think, can be the next segment that can be electrified. The use of electric vehicles, the use of other elements over here can protect Pakistan from the next major crisis that could come, because let's be honest, geopolitical crises are part and parcel, and the idea or the strategy cannot be to eliminate them, but how you protect yourself or become resilient against them. So the idea at the end of the day is that we are currently at a crossroads. The 2022 crisis in Europe showed us how prices increase and how they impact the energy system in the country. And that was one of the factors pushing consumers in our country towards solar. This crisis shows that revolution needs to happen beyond just the power sector, and to electrify all end users at the end of the day. And when I say electrification, I mean electrification using renewables, because there's no point in adopting EVs if you're going to charge them using fossil fuel based electricity. So I'm sure we're going to be presenting a charter over here with some recommendations, and just to increase or double down on the investment in renewables and EVs and all these other renewable energy sources. So I will conclude over here. I'm more than happy to discuss any of these methodologies or research, so feel free to reach out, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Nabia, for showcasing all of these numbers, and how, again, showing all of us how renewables actually has, particularly solar, has provided Pakistan that shield and prevented it from the much more significant impact we would have faced otherwise. So I think with this, we have actually discussed a lot of the power sector, but again, a very significant impact of this all geopolitical shocks has actually been on Pakistan's industrial sector that was already suffering a lot from the increased energy prices. So for this, let me invite Mr. Mohammad Abdul Rafe from Alternate Collectives and also a member of Alliance for Climate Justice and Clean Energy for a technical presentation on the gas and the industrial sector. So with this, Professor, it's over to you. Thank you. If we just turn this mic on, it's on the back of you.
Risen to the 4743 MMBTU. So this definitely made a room for the industries to transition to other options. And of course, government also paved the way for them to use the services of the grid. And then also automatically we saw how industries also made a transition to the solar. So the two main key points below here show how government incentivized the use of the electricity on the grid. and we see a marked reduction in that. Yeah. So this graph, I mean, maybe should have come later, but what we are trying to see here is decline in gas use over 2 consecutive years in the same months. Over here, you see, like, at the top bottom, the bar reflects the domestic sector. See, in August 2025, it was about 4 to 5 mmCFD. And then see in April, sorry, not August, April 2026, it is at 272 mmCFD. Now, these allocations are not new, or in other words, they reflect the pre-war scenario. The pre-war scenario which the SNGPL saw in its own system, and we see a massive decline. Look at the pink bar which reflects the industrial and captive power plants. There is a marked dip in that, which means captive and industries were already facing a structural decline in their demand on gas. Yes, here again we see some stats on how much demand on the grid increase. But the main point that I want to make here, yeah, at the top we see how B2 and B3, like the major industries, their demand on the grid exceeded or at least increased. But the main point that I want to make that this increase in demand on the grid is not uniform. Right, in some discourse it was major, and in some discourse it was quite low, which shows if we want to understand the problem of the energy security in the context of war for industries, then we need to ground it in different locations. It cannot be very generalized statement. And in the next slides we will see what is the situation on SSGC system. Colleagues have been talking about K Electric and SSGC and other systems. But the key point is, yes, there has been a transition and there has been a structural change, and that happened before the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which we need to keep in mind. Same thing here again, we see how we see a marked decline in the sales volume of gas on the SNGPL system. By the way, SNGPL is the major distributor of gas in the country in compared to the SSGC. So the sales volumes or the access to the gas that it gets is far beyond than SSGC gets. And SNGPL usually caters to the customers in Punjab and then KPK. Next, yes. These are a couple of graphs which show the transition or the deployment of solar in different industrial and captive. See the total demand that we mapped at least a year back. Kamran can correct me if I am mistaken. So that was about 400 megawatt. And maybe by this it has increased by at least, I would say, 200 to 300 megawatt. And here again, so this is the important graph that we couldn't refine it further, but see, this is the quantum of the natural gas available on the system at the very left, which is about 2890 mmCFD. Then look at the volume of LNG, 957 mmCFD. Now it looks pretty huge, right? But if you go back and remember how much of it was being diverted, how much of it was being diverted to the domestic sector, how much of it was being regarded as surplus, this comes down very, it comes down starkly. And then add two more factors into this. First, only within, I would say, within a week before, we saw at least 135 mmCFD of domestic gas adding up to the system, which is significant. And then add the volume that was curtailed to make room for RLNG, and which is now being revived. And there is a hope that it will be revived in the system. So if we do the math, we would say that the shock of the RLNG disruption is not significant or even major, I would say. Here, next, I think what we need to focus on, like I mentioned earlier, how the relationship of industries vis-a-vis grid is locational. So here we see that the use or the reliance on gas within the SSGC system almost stays stable. I mean, this is a kind of anomaly, or I would say a kind of I couldn't theorize it properly, but I think there can be many reasons. Because if the demand on SNDPL system is declining, one would expect that the same would happen on SSGC, but it is not happening. Maybe it is because maybe Sindh government is providing subsidies to the industries, because otherwise reliance on gas is very costly, and I'm sure industries on their own cannot rely on that. Or maybe they are forced to do that because they don't have either a reliable access to the grid, or maybe there are some other bottlenecks vis-a-vis installing solar or wind or other problems, because there are many industrial zones and there is no space for actually installing or going for solar. Land is a major problem. So, but overall, we also see here, how K Electric also relies heavily on RLNG. And we do acknowledge here that K Electric can face problems. But again, if we look at the systematic nature of the domestic gas and how these two systems are connected, and if we also factor in the declining demand on gas in the summer, because the demand on gas in summer is relatively lower compared to the winter. So all of these possibilities direct us to the possibility that maybe K Electric can find alternatives in the form of domestic gas. But here again, we also refer to some other problems or the question of accountability. For instance, a couple of years back, K Electric retired some of its domestic gas-based power plants earlier to make room for the RLNG-based power plants. Why? Why it is trying to produce costly electricity when there was a possibility to generate it from the domestic gas? There again, there is a problem of how industries and K Electric have been competing historically. Industries wanting access to the cheaper molecules, and then K Electric ending up producing more costly electricity and passing the burden on the consumers. That's a different problem. But just that is very important that we need to keep in mind, because what we will decide next, or whatever measures we take next, we need to look at these anomalies, distortions, and other problems, because otherwise we will end up repeating the same mistakes that we made in the past. These are again bars showing the use of gas on the SSGC system, and some of the data we couldn't collect. So we feel the 2025 and 26 graph would again, the bar would go up. And here I think there are some reflections. What I point out is fiscal consolidation measures. Since we are in the IMF programs and there are certain conditionalities that we cannot get out of very easily. So we feel like fiscal consolidation measures regarding debt optimization, tariff rationalization can disrupt energy security for the industries, which need affordable, sustainable, and secure electricity. So one of the conditions that has been highlighted is there is a very clear statement, which is if there is a loss in the revenue collection on tariff, the burden will be shifted to the industries. So there is no reliance or there is no stability on the prices, which is very important. And second, we also show how National Electricity Plan approved in 2024 and then revised, I think 5-6 months back. It connects security, affordability, and sustainability together. So we need to link them together whenever we talk about the energy security. There is also a reference on how World Bank's country partnership framework continues to think about the centralized fossil and hydrocentric transmission and distribution systems, which may not necessarily guarantee energy security in Pakistan. So there is a need to definitely review and renegotiate how funding and policy assistance can be diverted to the micro, mini, and then modernization paradigm. And lastly, I think what I would want to emphasize is the energy security is not definitely connected to the Strait of Hormuz opening or closing. There are several other structural issues that we need to keep in mind. For instance, industries for a very long time, and even I would say still the problem continues, is the planning for the industries haven't been made part of the centralized main planning instruments like ITSEP. Even if you look at the most recent iterations of IGSEP, there is not much discussion on how we can provide reliable security or reliable access to the electricity to the industries. The focus continues to be on the generation side. And yeah, I think there are few we can make. I think we can discuss some other things, but ultimately, I think the last point that I want to make, Pakistan will save a lot of money because of the disruption in RLNG. Where that money can go, where it can be spent most efficiently, that is the question that we need to discuss. But yes, these are the main findings. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rafi, for a very comprehensive overview of the gas and industrial sector and impacts it's having. So I think with this, let me thank all of the three presenters for really insightful presentations. So again, based on these discussions, as well as all of the partner organizations collectively have over the time have actually been developing, you could call it reform priorities or charter of demand on how Pakistan's energy future can be made more shock-proof, how it can be made more sustainable. For that, we are in the process of preparing a draft. We would actually like to present some of the key recommendations or demands we actually paid from this portfolio for your feedback as well. For this, let me invite Dr. Umesh Abdul Rahman. Umesh is from Renewables First, but at the same time, he's also the coordinator for Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition, who will be presenting the charter developed jointly by the PREC and ACJC. So with this, Umesh, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum ji. Good afternoon. I hope all of you will be fine. A lot of data from our three esteemed panelists. I saw some of the people dozing off, and I know most of you would be aching to hear to Lady and Badr Saab, so I won't be taking a lot of time. Just a few points to make, and I would start on a lighter note. Recently, I got to hear a joke that doesn't matter which part of the world is engaged in any geopolitical confrontation, there would be three countries who would get impacted. Two of the countries would be the countries which are engaged in the direct political or the other kind of confrontation, and third one would be Pakistan. And that would always be the case. But just one important thing, and now taking the conversation towards a bit towards the serious issue that we are having. If we get to look on the report by World Economic Forum, they publish every year a risk assessment report. If you get to see that geo-economic and geopolitical confrontation or the state-based armed conflict has been ranked as the most severe risk for the next 2 years. If we look at the geo-economic confrontation or the geopolitical confrontation, Pakistan sits squarely in the firing line. And whenever we talk about the region of Middle East, there is a very famous quotation, Badr Saab would definitely know this, that peace is always an interlude between two wars when it comes to the region of Middle East. So this is why, the reason we are here is because of the energy security, because of the US-Iran war. But I want to take a different route, and I would tell you why we are demanding something different in this charter of demand that we are developing, and I would be presenting this on behalf of Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition and Alliance for Climate Justice and Clean Energy. First and foremost thing is, as I mentioned, that the first reason is war. But now the second reason is the climate change crisis. We cannot always talk about the war crisis. These wars will come and go. Recently, I got to read a very interesting article, and I would like to highlight the title of that article. It was "After This War, Before the Next One." And Pakistan would keep suffering from, the political or the prices shock. That we get to. The government needs the government gets to absorb these shocks by providing subsidies or through different fiscal mechanisms. But first and foremost thing, because we mostly talk about the energy and power sector of Pakistan, there was a time when we developed our grid around hydropower. Then there was a time around 2010, 2013 when we developed or designed our grid around the thermal. Now is the time that we make all our investments RE focused and RE centered, and we develop our grid around this narrative of renewable energy. There is this one climate change crisis. The second thing that I want to highlight that for the past, I would say 6 years, sorry, whenever we had a planning document, it always highlighted the least cost aspect of any technology. What we are demanding through this charter of demand, that all right, least cost aspect is really important, but there should be two associated the factors that should also be factored in. And the one is environmental aspect, because most of the projects, they have an external cost. The second one is the indigenous aspect of the technology, because we have seen through this war that if we are going to rely on the infrastructure which works on the imported fuels, we are actually going to suffer in a really bad manner. So I mean, in simple words, we should move from the thermal assets towards the flexible renewable generation assets. I would tell you what are the 6 main themes or the pillars of this charter of demand, and then I'm going to just highlight 5 or 6 major important demands from this charter. And not sure, but perhaps we would be sharing this charter soon with these people also. The first pillar is about the clean indigenous resources. The interesting thing is that whenever we talk about that government should invest in indigenous resources, this is where the debate gets interesting. This is where the discussion gets interesting, because for our very respected government entities, they think that indigenous resources mean coal, hydropower, domestic gas. They have a place. They have a place. But the thing is that now the term we are using, or sorry? Call it biomass, जरा sophisticated अंदाज में हम इसे कह लेते हैं जी. अच्छा किया आपने highlight कर दिया. But the term that we are using, or I mean, if you look at the Charter of Demands being advocated at the moment, they are using this term of clean indigenous resources. And this is what we are saying, that invest in solar, invest in wind, invest in storage. Invest in solar, wind, and storage, sorry. The second pillar is the early retirement plan for fossil fuel power plants. Perhaps I don't need to emphasize on it because you guys would be touching upon that pillar. The third thing is that developing an industrial ecosystem through which we can localize the RE technologies. One important thing, Pakistan has been importing fossil fuels, but if you look at the solar panels or the storage rush that is about to come to Pakistan, we still import all of these things from the China. And you never know that when we can get into any kind of confrontation, be it the economic confrontation, be it the anti-dumping policies, be it the China +1 policies through which organizations are now thinking to diversify their supply chains out of China. So there can be multiple issues in next 3 or 4 years. And this is where it gets important that Pakistan invest in its own domestic local industrial ecosystem. The fourth pillar is about the transport sector. We all know that the major hit was taken by this transport sector, and we all are suffering, right? Nabia, I'm sorry if perhaps I shouldn't have said this publicly, but there is one thing. Nabia asked me if she can present online because the fuel price has, gone through the roof. And I was thinking the same thing, that if I should be coming to this event or I should be sitting there and I should, just present these things in an online mode. But these are the things that through these price shocks, we are actually going to suffer a lot. And in coming days, these things are going to get even worse. All right. The fifth pillar is about the energy and power sector planning process. Whenever we talk about the planning process, we actually mean if there is data transparency in the country and if there is data availability in the country. Rafe has just mentioned that they want to make a lot of analysis. They have the capability, they have the resources, but most often we don't get the data. And even if we get the data, we really don't know if it's accurate or not. So about this planning process, we are demanding data transparency and data availability. And the sixth pillar is around the agricultural sector. Perhaps, I don't know if I need to emphasize it, but energy security is always linked to food security. As Rafe just mentioned, that we don't have gas, which means our fertilizer power plants won't be able to operate. It doesn't mean that we would have expensive fertilizers. It means we won't have fertilizers. to plant the seeds and everything. And now I would just move forward towards some of the demands which are kind of the important ones. First thing, that government should avoid investing in infrastructure which operates on imported fuels. The net metering policy should be rolled back, and all taxes on solar products should be lifted. All taxes on battery energy storage systems should be lifted. And just by the way, I received a number today in the morning that there is 48% tax associated with battery energy storage systems. Imagine if this 48% is shaved off, how rapidly this storage revolution would take place in Pakistan. The fourth demand is that the government should divert fossil fuel subsidies and the costs from the projects, Rafi, that you were mentioning too. There would be many, 7 gigawatt of projects have been shaved off from the RGSEP so that money or a certain portion of public sector development program can go into the development of ecosystem, EV ecosystem. Another demand is regarding the EV policy. We know that there has been one major feature of this EV policy, that there would be share of 30% EV in new EV sales. The thing is, now we should not think about these sales, rather we should think in the production terms also, that the government should grant licenses to the organizations, to the industries, that they produce at least 30% of the EVs inside Pakistan. And then regarding the agricultural sector, that government should roll out subsidies and programs for solarization of the sector. Another important thing that was done in Europe, mainly because of the demand side management, but we can also link this storage aspect to what scenario we are having in Pakistan at the moment, is that make storage mandatory for all utility scale projects above 100 megawatt. And lastly, regarding the energy communities and the just energy transition that we always talk about, that provide a framework for enabling microgrids for the community-owned energy projects. So I can go on and on, but I guess you guys would soon receive the chart of demand. We would like you to endorse it.
Demand number 1, 2 and 3 again, please.
मुझे तो पता भी नहीं है मैंने अब कौन सी बोली थी, क्योंकि ऊपर नीचे हो गई। अगर आप मुझे बता दें। अच्छा 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 The second one is regarding the rollback of net metering policy, and that all taxes related to solar products should be lifted. And the third one is that lift all taxes on battery energy storage systems. And we are also demanding that a battery emergency should be implemented in Pakistan. So the first one is avoid investing in infrastructure which operates on imported fossil fuels. So I'm going to stop here. If you have any questions or more inputs to make, I can take it in the roundtable session. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much, Umesh, for initially mentioning the backdrop of this charter, and also then mentioning some of the very key demands that Umesh kind of placed at then. And I think taking lead from what the discussion that started towards the very end, I'm very sure that a lot of the people, Umesh, here have to add on to what has actually been discussed, and perhaps going to before Madam Liddy and Badasaf will take your suggestions, opinions. So basically, one of the idea, I mean, we'll definitely be circulating this charter of demand in a day or two, but one of the idea for today was also to get your perspective on two things. One, your views on the key contours of change that Umesh has just recently mentioned, the 6 thematic areas he highlighted. And second, if you believe any other priority reforms needs to be discussed or included in any similar charter that we're kind of pitching. So I think with this, we actually will be moving towards the discussion section, and the floor is open for your suggestions as well as your input. I'll request to please, for the online participants, you can click on the raised hand tab. And for the in-person participants, just let us know if you want to, if you wish to speak, if you wish to add any points from your end. And if needed, we can go perhaps, I initially thought of going it one by one, for firstly focusing on the power sector, then coming to industries, but looking at the discussion, the way it has unfolded, we can perhaps take them jointly as well. And I believe even beyond what Umesh has presented, a lot of partner organizations of Renewable Energy Coalition as well as HCJC sitting here. So even if any one of them wants to further add on to any of the point that they think have been missed, feel free to do that as well. So I think we'll be, if you could just turn on the mic, because we also have online participants and they won't be able to hear you.
Just wanted to, Khadim Hussain, CRPD, just wanted to bring to your notice whether we should include in these demands and the pillars of demands, this adjusting solarization into the grid system. Secondly, decentralizing grid system, creating mini and micro grids, and make room for the off-grid generation of solarization as well. So I think this decentralization, this whole paradigm must be pointed out very clearly. It should not be just, it should not be left implied. Thank you.
Ji, thank you so much, Khadim Hussain Saab, for your interventions. Just moving forward. Sure, Sana, please.
I would like to add to the point that Umesh mentioned, that we need to focus not to invest further in developing the infrastructure for fossil fuels. One strong connection with these investments is that we also need to look into the stranded investments that we already have in the power sector, like the coal assets, coal plants that we have. We need to repurpose them. One way out could be to repurpose these into solar energy hubs with the battery energy storage. So we also need to look into this area.
Thank you. Sure, please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So in the earlier presentation, you were saying that capacity charges are fixed and cannot be touched. So I was wondering, why is that so? Because in other countries, one of the things we're targeting is to question the power purchase agreements that include these capacity charges, and to start renegotiating them, for instance, or doing unilateral action on those outdated and unfair power purchase agreements.
When I said the capacity charges are fixed, this is because the power purchase agreements that we currently have signed in with these power plant owners is that we have to pay them a certain amount of the capacity inclusion. So the government is trying to renegotiate, but at the moment there is no fruitful kind of aspect added to these renegotiations.
Yeah, so the government did formulated a special task force that was tasked to renegotiate some of the private purchase agreements. They were able to do somewhat with the local investors. But again, one very important point to discuss here is that a lot of these PPAs are with the Chinese investors, and they kind of come under a very broader framework of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So, I mean, again, we actually want to, but if you look at broader from the perspective of the overall BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, then even for the China, the incentive or that push to renegotiate any such agreement is because they actually don't really want to perhaps showcase the initial phase of CPEC as kind of, you could also perhaps call it as an unsuccessful model. So perhaps a lot of appetite to renegotiate those agreements. I mean, definitely the upcoming investments under the CPEC or through Chinese is towards the low carbon development, but most of the focus of the Chinese financial instruments that are coming up is towards how the future investments are going to be treated, rather than how we can actually do something around the previously led investments as well. But I think Rafe also wanted to add something, and perhaps Varasab also. So sorry. Okay,
I think
Varasab.
one of the biggest structural problems in power purchase agreements, not just in Pakistan, but all over the world, is that power is considered by the investors and all the guardians of capitalist system as a very, very special commodity. If you want to set up any production plant in Pakistan, the government will not guarantee you any capacity payment of producing, for instance, 1,000 pairs of shoes every single day. Does the government pay you for the capacity if you produce less than that, or if you produce half of that or 30% of that? No. And similarly, the government also does not offer you any guaranteed return on your investment. It does not guarantee you any special price on the shoes that you produce.
But on the electricity that you produce, the government offers you guaranteed rate of return and a guaranteed price. So it's not just the capacity payment, it's also these additional guarantees as well. And over and above, if I am making shoes in my factory and the raw material prices go up, the prices of my shoes will automatically will be adjusted in the local market. But in the power sector, if the prices go up, the government guarantees that the price of the raw materials will be adjusted in the ultimate price. So the overall, in a nutshell, the overall structure of these power purchase agreements is a very, very special case in the international system. And challenging that system at Pakistan's level, I don't think it's possible. At Asia level, maybe. But at the global level, if we all put in our entire energies collectively, maybe we can get some smaller wins in the.
Thank you so much, Bharat Sahab. Last comment from Rafe on this.
Yeah, just to
Rafe.
more layers. This conversation, I think this is true. I mean, most of these contracts trigger arbitration clauses, and they happen either in the London or in South Korea, where we don't have much leverage. And secondly, but like this is important question that we are actually exploring. So for instance, if we look at the RLNG based power plants, so much of them are like, owned by the government themselves. They are public power plants. If the Qatar can invoke force majeure and it can stop the supply of LNG, why we can't do the same in our context? Like, if you can't provide them RLNG, why not just invoke that? That, okay, we are not in a position to give you a gas. So there is no way for us to continue paying you the capacity payments and everything. So this is a question that we are thinking and reflecting on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rafe. I believe we actually had, before coming to Manzoor, I think we have one question, then I'll come to Manzoor.
Okay, I'm Farooq Tariq from Pakistan Kisan Rabta Committee. I have some general comments on the discussion. There are two wars going on at this time. One with Afghanistan and one Iran has been attacked by Israel. Both wars has affected one of the community which has been just neglected, and thanks Umesh that you have mentioned about that, and that is farmers community. At this time, the most affected community in Pakistan is farmers. Their prices has gone down. I have seen total destruction of prices of potatoes, cauliflowers, you name any crop, they are in losses. And on the top of that, government has abolished the fixation of minimum support price for the crops. Now, I totally agree that there are war is one reason and climate change is another reason for this crisis. But also we have to see the impact of this on the communities. And those particularly when we see this capacity payments, these are the most unfair, unjust agreements in the history of Pakistan. It goes back to IPPs. Look at 94, 96 IPP contracts and come from there till today. These are the most anti-people, anti-farmers, anti-workers agreements where people have to pay for the rich and rich becomes more rich and government is becoming more poor and the rich are becoming more richer. So we have to do away with this capacity charges. There should be no justification to keep the capacity charges paying to these IPPs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think just echoing the point around the agriculture and what eventually a reform that we took was to reduce the price of gasoline rather than reducing the price of diesel, which was the primary fuel that the farming community or is being consumed in agriculture. So also perhaps something that would have been different if it was on a diesel. So now coming to Manzoor.
Thank you, Beth. So these are all very valid points, but most of these points are linked to medium to short-term initiatives. So what are we proposing in terms of short-term initiatives? For example, agriculture sector and the transportation sector, they are highly dependent on diesel currently. Now, what we are focusing on is battery energy storage, and you cannot transition these sectors overnight. So are we suggesting some short-term measures related to the existing market of the fossil fuels, which are very relevant because the inflation, like once the agriculture prices in the agriculture sector inflates, it directly transition towards the consumers, and the overall consumer will get impacted. So are we presenting some short-term measures in these agenda, or it's only focused on the renewables?
I mean, from my experience, I can tell that there are, but I'll perhaps let Umesh, if you want to respond to it briefly, and then coming to Shamil and
Manzoor, very valid point. In fact, yesterday when we had this meeting of our working group to develop this chart, we were constantly having discussion around this topic, that we have the recommendations which are like medium to long-term demands or the suggestions, but we don't have any suggestion for the short-term measures. One thing that is important, that as you mentioned, that this change is not going to happen overnight. It means that we need to develop an ecosystem, right? When we mentioned the EV ecosystem, and these ecosystems also, I mean, don't get developed overnight, which means that there would always be some medium to long-term kind of measures that the government should take. Regarding the immediate short-term measures that I can talk about, in next 3 months, we are going to have our next fiscal year budget. What we are trying, as Dr. Abid also mentioned, that if government can lift all of the taxes on the solar, if government can lift all of the associated taxes on the battery energy storage systems, if government can somehow roll back the net metering policy, and measures like these, I mean, which would immediately impact the transport sector as well, the agriculture sector as well, and the energy sector as well.
Thank you. But again, I do think the point is very well noted.
Just to add a couple of points, I think there are 3 or 4 basic demands that can be made in the short run. And one of the most important of all of them is that the government should not be allowed to use consumption of energy or fuel as a taxation measure, as a revenue collection measure. Petroleum division is not subordinate to Federal Board of Revenue. It should not be, but it is, because all the taxes that FBR should be collecting are being collected by other agencies. So, and if you look at the recent hike in petroleum prices, suddenly petroleum levy went up by a huge margin. And then the Prime Minister appeared on television and he said, I am bringing it down. You did not bring the price down. You only brought the unjustified, unfair petroleum development levy down. And petroleum development levy is also an anomaly, is a misnomer, in the sense that after the 18th Amendment, the federal divisible pool is divisible among the federating units. Petroleum development levy is not. So it means that all the money that the government is getting through petroleum development levy or diesel development levy or any other levy is going directly to FBR. So one of the main demands that we can make in the short run is that petroleum consumption should not be a source of revenue earning for the government. Petroleum prices should reflect market realities. If market is going up, okay, take the price up, but also do not increase the rate of levy that you are already levying it. That is number one. Number two is that we saw in the wake of Ukraine war that many countries reverted to the use of coal when gas was not available from Russia to Europe. But none of those countries used coal as a long-term solution. All of them used coal as a temporary solution, and at the same time, they doubled down on their renewable energy initiatives. UK is now totally coal-free as far as power production is concerned. So are many other countries in the global north. So our government should also not use this crisis as a means to double down on fossil fuels, like it did in 2013 and 2015. And thirdly, this crisis should not become an opportunity or a window for the government to bring in greedy investors with all these long-term contracts with capacity payments. So in the short run, we should have these 3 demands. Number one, no taxation through petroleum consumption or energy consumption. Number two, no knee-jerk reaction and focusing on fossil fuel usage more than it should be. And number 3, no long-term lock-ins for fossil fuels to avoid this short-term crisis. I think these are the 3 very important things that we can add in our charter of demand.
Thank you so much.
Just one more, this is the extension of what Badar Saab just mentioned, focusing and pushing the IMF to reduce some of the burdens that it has already imposed, because the government without concession from the IMF cannot do that.
Thank you. I think Shamila wanted to add something to it.
I want to just say that in the last budget, government has imposed a 2.5 petroleum levy on petrols on every users. So we can put a demand that the government should provide the amount that he has collected through this levy, and they also said that that amount will be spent on the environmental upgradation. So we can also demand that how much this amount has been spent on that purpose. That's all.
Yes, the ring fencing of carbon levy, we've actually had a couple of discussions around different potential scenarios on how that levy can actually be used, for the EV for supporting the EV infrastructure, and even for some of the community resilient initiatives as well. So yes, thank you, very well noted point. I believe it is coming under one of the pillars of the electrification of the transport sector under the Charter of Demand. Coming to Kamran sir, your point, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had one fact to mention, which is that if you look at figures, barring the CPEC related coal projects, most of the capacity payments are paid by the government to itself. It's not really the IPPs. The whole debate around capacity payments, it always looks very suspicious to me. What is it that we are talking about? We are not looking at the numbers. These capacities are things that government pays to itself, to its nuclear plants, to its hydel power plants. And these nuclear, especially the hydel plants, are the same ones which are driven by these debt-oriented, institutions. IMF will come in, World Bank will come in, and they will tell us you need, in fact, more of the hydel, and then you, of course, need. Since you see the capacity payment itself is not really a very unusual thing. If it exists in the whole world, there's a reason for it. Of course, if someone is, expanding billions and billions of dollars in something, they will need some guarantees, right? So what can be or should be asked is to have some sense of balance or justice when we do this. For example, we can, if we cannot use RLNG, we cannot tell Qatar Energy that we cannot use RLNG, right? But if they cannot give us RLNG, they can tell us that we can't give us RLNG, right? So that probably, I think, is the main cause. As for capacities, we really need to have some balanced view on who is paying home in terms of capacities, and it might turn out to have some very different results. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamran Bhai. I think we have two last points, one from Salha, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think Ian Morris in his book always mentioned that war and conflict always bring development, innovation, and structural changes. So this is the, I think, right time that we need to look into the shocks that are external as well as internal, that how our industrial sector is transforming and what are the changes they need immediately. So the external factors definitely are from the US-Iran war. So and internal factors that is currently being in talk is the budget, which is approaching 2027 in June. So we need to look into that. What are the changes that we are needing for the industrial sector to act better or sustainable way for the external and internal factors. So one of the concern that has been raised that on the LNG supply. So we do have a surplus LNG right now because we have refused so much cargoes of LNG that not be traveled to Pakistan. So the first charter of demand which I wanted to put in is that that government must immediately release the 300 MMCFD for the domestic gas that was previously shut down for the sectors which are export oriented, especially the cement and the ceramics, because they are not relying on the electrified manufacturing process. So this is the immediate relief that they can provide to the industries. Secondly, IMF has formally rejected that to freeze the 15% of gas levy on industrial captive power, forcing a hike of 20% of increase in the coming months of 2026. So for this, if they collected the 20% levy from the IMF, that revenue generation could not be used for other purposes, but it should be specifically used for the subsidization of the low manufacturing processes, low manufacturing technology, and also electric-based operations, not on the other sectors. So moving forward, we have budget 2026-27, and recently the government has also announced that this time the budget the industrial sector would be mostly focused on the green growth and climate resilience. So industries are expecting that if they are putting so much concern on the green growth, so there must be subsidization on the industrial scale battery storage, waste heat recovery systems, and also the energy efficient machinery in that context. So because the industries are in the phase of CBAM, so these type of interventions from the government on the budget side would help them to make their processes sustainable and more operational. Industry also expect that to address the IMF mandated concern, that if one option was that the levy collected from the industries should be allocated to their efficient processes, but the second option is also that the blanket tax also highly efficient cogeneration plants, which utilizes waste heat for manufacturing, and also the inefficient ones. So industries are heavily lobbying, and also they have concern that the efficiency tiered levy should be deployed where plants that meet stringent thermal efficiency standards are granted exemptions or lower tax tiers. So such type of interventions are basically needed right now from the external shocks and also from the internal ones. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Saleha. Do we have any final comment? We could. I'm requesting you to be a little brief, please.
And what will come and go, but why don't we are discussing about decentralization of the system?
Decentralization. I think again, from our perspective, a lot of the recommendations that are also present in Charter of Demand does target that how decentralized renewable energy, even going beyond just installation, but perhaps more decentralized planning should be the very central of this reform. So I think there are a lot of interventions going into it, but again, taking lead from Manzoor was also mentioned, they're kind of more like medium to long-term reforms. Please.
Comments on this. Decentralization, we can at least talk about the decentralization of renewable energy systems. So it does not necessarily need to be governed and managed through federal government or for that matter, provincial government. So we need to start talking about the local governments regulating very micro grids, grassroots level. So I think we can insert something on these lines. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the adding remarks. So I think with this, we actually thank you so much for all the really insightful additions, and we'll see how in what manner they would be incorporated and improved within the charter that we're actually developing. But again, thank you so much for all the very helpful interventions throughout the discussions, again, being really healthy. With this, let's kind of move towards the really esteemed guests we have today in our final session, that is concluding. So for this, I know a lot of you since the start are really looking forward to listening from Madam Liddy Nakpil. She's the coordinator of the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, APMDD. So thank you so much, firstly, and again on the behalf of SDPI, once again we would welcome you to Pakistan and especially to SDPI. And I think you have been listening to the discussion, but I think the floor is yours for the useful interventions you would like to make. So thank you so much.
First of all, every time I hear the word esteemed, I get so embarrassed, no? Please, We're not used to that kind of description in the Philippines. I'm very, very thankful to be invited here. I found the whole discussion so interesting. I think it's very important. We were just talking over lunch about how, or even earlier than lunch, about how we must really develop kind of like a menu of policy alternatives that we should be engaging our governments with. No, we can't just continue to just react to the stupid things that they're trying to do in the face of the energy crisis. So I found this very, very helpful. I think it's something that we need to do in every country. Oh, I'm sure in other countries there's already efforts to do that, but I think the important thing that it has to come with a whole broad range of organizations and players so that it can have traction with government. But that also needs patient discussion and building of consensus across many issues. And I find also that a lot of the things that you're grappling with are the similar things we're grappling with in other countries. For instance, I'm sorry I sparked this debate or exchange about the capacity payments. It's something that we have grappled with in almost every country in Asia for so long, because they have led to debt, greater indebtedness. They have led to very high electricity costs in some parts of the world. In the Philippines, at one point, most of our electricity payments were going to unused capacity because the dispatch was very low, but we were tied with all these power purchase agreements. Just on that point, my request is if we just don't say anything to the extent that it's untouchable, so that it leaves us open to exploring other ways of going around it. Maybe we can't totally cancel it, but certainly there has to be room for renegotiation. And just on the need that it's universal, it's also true because now we're dealing with renewable energy developers and they require offtake guarantees. And that means we need to then work out another way of doing these power purchase agreements that removes some of the most onerous aspects of it that we all know that exists with fossil fuel developers and producers. So that's one flag. The other is, I think, debt is a common issue that we're all dealing with. So the interlinkage with debt is something that we need to do for the whole region. Now, as regards to Badar's point that you made about the capacity payments, but also I think in general for many of these fights, perhaps if we're thinking about the fight only in terms of our country alone, then it really sounds so formidable that it's almost impossible. But at the regional level, we will have much greater leverage, and at a global level, certainly. And that's one of the things that we hope we can work more closely together with, so that as a people globally, we will have much power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Liddy. And I think with this, let me come to Badar Alam Saab. Badar Saab have been again looking after both coalition as well as ACGC since long time, and again pitching a lot of the points that we mentioned here. So Badar Saab, you've been here since the start of the discussion as well. If you would also like to kind of conclude the debate for us.
Thank you, Ved, and thank you, SDPI, for organizing this very, very timely event. I think we are in the middle of a crisis that we are not really seriously thinking about what are the implications for Pakistan could be in the long run. Our government gives us implications that are financial and that just concern the next 3 months or 4 months or the next budget or the next IMF tranche. It doesn't tell us what this crisis means for Pakistan in the next 3 to 5 years or next 5 to 10 years. So that is something that we need to think about. Of course, we also need to think about the short term and the immediate impacts of this crisis, but that's only one minor part of this deliberation. The bigger part is that we think about the medium term and think about the long term and continue to warn the government that it should not take any medium term and long term steps like the ones it took in 2013 and 2015 period to lock us into a fossil fuel trap that has capacity payments inbuilt, and that has guaranteed rate of return inbuilt, and that has energy prices changes locked in it. So that is something we need to continuously bang on the government's door and say, this is something that you should not do, and this is something that we will not accept if you want to do. I'll give you I will like narrate a small anecdote. I'll share a small anecdote with you before moving forward, and that is about the United States of America. All of you know Churchill, the famed British Prime Minister. His mother was from the United States. And he once famously said that the countrymen of my mother make the right choice after exhausting all other options. After they have made all the wrong choices, they will finally arrive at the one final correct decision. But the unfortunate thing is that under Trump leadership, even that option does not exist. They are not going to make the right choice after having exhausted all the wrong options. They will continue to take wrong options and continue to lead the world into a very, very dangerous kind of a quagmire out of which we do not really know how to get out. And I think our own governments over the last many, many decades have done the same thing. They have made extremely wrong choices as far as our energy is concerned, as far as power sector in particular is concerned. If you look at how our power system has transformed since 1980s, you will see dead wood and dead bodies of wrong policies everywhere. And as a result of that dead wood and dead bodies of various wrong policies, you will also see a mountain of debt that we accumulated to implement those policies. So I think the biggest challenge for us is to link all those wrong policies with the debt burden that Pakistan has incurred, and also link those policies with the mounting climate challenge that we are facing now. As we sit in this hall, outside of this hall, there is rain that is all like entirely untimely, and it is destroying wheat crop at a very, very large scale. Farooq Saab talked about fertilizer availability. I would say climate is a much bigger and much longer and much more like long-lasting challenge to this country's food security and this country's poverty level than anything else. And there is absolutely no talk about this while we are talking about this energy shortage and energy supply crisis. We need to link this crisis with these two factors, climate change and our debt crisis. Unless and until these three factors come together, and unless and until we have a worldview that can bring together these three factors, and we have kind of a solution or a pathway that clearly gives us a tripartite solution to all these three problems together, we cannot really move forward. And I'm really happy that some of the issues that we have raised here pertain to all three sectors and factors here. And I'm very thankful for a wonderful debate by all of you. And I'm thankful for Lydie to be here and enlighten us with her insights. And we will continue to request her and continue to badger her with more demands to be a part of our discussions in Pakistan, and make all of us a part of the regional discussions and global discussions that she is leading in various capacity. So thank you very much for coming over and taking part in this. Thank you.
Thank
to
you.
all.
Thank you everyone for joining the discussion.
It's very interesting. I didn't know it was going to be about the Charter of Finance. You're going to give us a copy of your PowerPoint, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, but you're, it's very right. It's not like the problem